Navigating EU Employment Compliance, a guide for scaling businesses. If you stay until the end, I'll share a simple but solid strategy to scale your business across Europe without compliance risk stacking up. Let me tell you about a SaaS company that lost 20,000 euros because of one contractor in Italy. They thought they were compliant, but they weren't. Expanding your business into the European Union feels like a huge win. You get access to incredible talent, strong economies, and strategic new markets. But here's the catch. Hiring across the EU means dealing with 27 different sets of labor laws. What's perfectly legal in the Netherlands might get you into hot water in Spain. A standard practice in Germany could trigger huge penalties in France. For businesses that are scaling up, especially with small people ops or legal teams, this creates a hidden, creeping risk. It's not a sudden explosion. It's a slow burn we call compliance creep. And if you don't manage it, it will definitely manage you. Failing at cross-border hiring is expensive. EU labor fines can range from a few €100 to over $250,000. So why do so many companies underestimate this? Well, at first, a few hires feel manageable. Contractors seem flexible, and the expansion feels gradual. But with each new hire in a new country, the complexity multiplies, and confidence plummets. In fact, while over 60% of US and 70% of UK businesses say hiring internationally is critical for their growth, only about 20% feel confident they're doing it compliantly. That gap between ambition and confidence, that's where the risk lives. Compliance creep starts small. You hire one person in Italy, then maybe two in Spain, and three more in Germany. Suddenly, you're juggling different contracts, different payroll systems, and wildly different rules for termination and social security. Your operations team shifts from building culture to fighting fires. They're stuck reviewing local contract clauses, untangling payroll variations, and fielding urgent legal questions they aren't equipped to answer. Compliance becomes a series of reactions, not a structured plan. It builds quietly in the background, until something forces a closer look. Maybe it's a funding round, a termination that goes wrong, a complaint from a local employee, or a regulatory audit. That's when all that hidden risk suddenly becomes very visible and very expensive. Let's go back to that 20,000 euros contractor in Italy. A US-based SaaS company hired a worker there as an independent contractor. They used a standard template agreement and paid monthly invoices. No local legal review. On the surface, it looked fine, but in reality, this contractor worked exclusively for them, followed their company schedules, used their internal systems, and reported to a manager. Italian authorities looked at this and said, "That's not a contractor, that's an employee." The result, 20,000 euros in back pay, missed social security contributions, unpaid taxes, and penalties. They weren't trying to break the law, they were just uninformed. Here's another one. A UK fintech expanded into Spain and later had to do layoffs. They used their UK redundancy process. But Spain has completely different mandatory rules, including consultation periods and strict severance calculations. They skipped these steps. And then there's the 46,000 euros lesson from Germany. A US tech startup was hiring directly there without a local entity. A single termination triggered a lawsuit, and the damages hit 46,000 euros because they had ignored Germany's strict co-determination laws about employee representation. Across TU5 risk areas pop up again and again. Worker classification, contract structure, payroll and social security, termination processes, and employee representation laws. Get one wrong, and you risk a fine. Get several wrong, and you're facing litigation. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to have a clear, structured view of your risks. This means doing formal assessments before you hire, understanding local laws before you enter a market, and centralizing your workforce data instead of using a patchwork of different systems. Your compliance strategy needs to scale just as fast as your hiring. EU employment compliance is complex, specific to each country, and doesn't forgive mistakes. But if you get it right, it becomes a massive competitive advantage. Investors love clean employment structures. Top candidates trust compliant employers, and when it comes time to restructure, it's manageable, not a catastrophe. If you're scaling across Europe, especially with a lean team, Don't wait for an audit to test your setup. Review your compliance, assess your contractor risk, and understand your obligations. If you've made it this far, here's the framework we use with scaling companies across Europe. There are 5 compliance areas you absolutely must nail. Miss one, you create friction. 1. Employment contracts using one generic EU template across markets is high risk. Spain requires locally mandated clauses, often in Spanish. Germany requires very specific written terms. France embeds mandatory employee protections directly into contracts. If your contracts aren't country-specific, they won't protect you in court. High risk, frequently audited. 2. Working time and leave. You cannot apply a global PTO policy across Europe. France has a 35-hour work week and strict overtime rules. Holiday entitlements vary. Sick leave obligations differ dramatically. Failing to localize working time policies leads to wage claims and penalties. This is operational risk, disguised as HR admin. 3. Benefits and Social Security. Ignoring employer pension contributions, insurance requirements, or statutory benefits creates medium to high exposure. For example, the Netherlands can require employers to fund sick pay for up to 2 years. That's not optional. Social Security compliance is not flexible in Europe. 4. Tax and payroll compliance. Misreporting tax or misclassifying employment type is high risk. Italy's strict contractor rules show how expensive this becomes. Payroll errors don't just create accounting issues. They trigger audits. 5. Termination and disputes. This is where risk becomes very high. In France, unfair dismissal can cost up to 24 months' salary, sometimes more. In Germany and Spain, procedural mistakes alone can invalidate terminations. Termination in the EU is a legal process, not a conversation. So if you're scaling across multiple EU countries, ask yourself, are your contracts localized? Are your working time rules compliant? Are social contributions accurate? Is payroll aligned with employment type? Are termination processes mapped per country? If not, compliance creep is already building, and the cost only shows up when you least want it to. Thanks for staying until the end. Remember, you can scale fast, but scale compliantly.